Welcome back to the Capitol, everyone. Good to see you. Two things I would emphasize today. Number one, we had an extensive discussion of S1, HR1, which majority leaders indicated is going to be on the floor next week. We have taken a good hard look at how the American public would feel about this. They clearly oppose most of the major provisions. They oppose turning the Federal Election Commission into a partisan operation, in other words, going from a judge to a prosecutor. They overwhelmingly oppose using public dollars, taxpayer dollars, to spend on political campaigns. They overwhelmingly support what is prevented in H.R. 1, which is photo ID at the polls. So think of this as exactly what it is, a partisan effort by the majority to take over at the federal level how we conduct all of American elections. They've been trying to do this for several years, by the way. The rationale for doing it is basically changed each year, but the core desire they have is to federalize all elections to try to achieve a benefit for the Democrats at the expense of the Republicans. Not surprisingly, there will not be a single Republican who supports it. Secondly, we had a presentation of the group of 5 Republicans who have been working with 5 Democrats to come up with a proposal on infrastructure. They briefed our conference on the details of that, and we'll see, what happens as a result. But it was a good briefing. They gave us all the details. There were many questions asked by our members.
Well, it's nice to see you all back here. I'm glad that we're able to do these things back in the Capitol again. I wanted to cover one thing that I don't think was on your radar screen last week, and that was an announcement by the Air Force that the main operating base for the first B-21 bombers is going to be at Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota. We're obviously very excited about that announcement. The B-21 is a next generation bomber. It's a stealth bomber and will be part of our nuclear triad well into the future. Obviously, that part of our capability is important if you look at the threats we face around the globe and places like the Indo-Pacific. There are only 3 countries that host strategic bombers: China, Russia, and the United States. And so we can't cede any ground when it comes to that capability, and to have that long-range strike as part of our arsenal. And we're delighted that South Dakota, and then of course Missouri and Texas also will ultimately be host for the B-21 bomber. It'll send a very strong message to our adversaries around the world that we mean business. And the disappointment, I guess, in all that is that's the good news. The bad news is that the Biden administration budget actually, when it comes to defense, increases defense by about 1%. At the same time, it's increasing non-defense discretionary spending by about 16%. And not the right message to send right now when we live in a very dangerous world where we have threats, it seems like, virtually every day popping up around the world. A lot of unrest out there. The United States needs to be able to project strength, and key to that is having a strong national security posture and a strong military. And the Biden administration sends all the wrong messages on that issue, as well as a lot of other issues with respect to their budget. And I would just say, to echo what the leader pointed out, that in light of all the things that we have going on today and the challenges that we face, and people around the country are worried about the threat China presents. I think they're worried about the rising costs associated with inflation, that next week the Senate Democrats are going to waste an entire week on S1, a bill that they know will not pass and represents the most radical, hostile takeover of state elections that we have ever seen. And when it comes to elections in this country, the Constitution provides that states have sovereignty there. That's the way it's always worked. And there isn't anything in this bill that I can't imagine the American people are going to want to see enacted a law, whether it's having taxpayers pay for federal elections, or whether it's politicizing the FEC, or whether it's codifying ballot harvesting or doing away with voter ID. This is a piece of legislation that needs to die and die quickly, and it's regrettable that the Senate Democrats have decided to waste an entire week of the Senate's floor time when there are so many important issues that we ought to be dealing with something that they know is destined to fail.
Well, for those of us who go home every weekend and talk to people and see what's on their mind, we're hearing very clearly what's on their mind. And it's not the things that Democrats are focusing on. It's the fact that we're facing inflation. The cost is up for gasoline. The cost is up for groceries. When people go to the store, these are the sorts of things that hit people in their pocketbooks, and they're very concerned. Gas is up 70 cents a gallon since Joe Biden has taken the oath of office. And in terms of somebody in Wyoming filling up their car or their truck, that adds about $20 per tank of fuel. So that's $20 they don't have to spend on something else. So it cuts into their ability to spend no matter what they're making. Additionally, when I talk to small business owners, they're having a hard time finding employees to hire. There are about 9 million jobs today that are unfilled in the United States. And it's not a surprise that when the government offers incentives where they pay more to not work than to work, with unemployment as well as a federal unemployment bonus, people aren't lazy, they're just logical. But those aren't the things that the Democrats are focused on, the things that we're hearing about at home. Chuck Schumer has a very different agenda. He sent out a Dear Colleague letter right before Memorial Day to say the things that he's interested in focusing on, and they're not the things. He ignores the issues of inflation. He ignores the incentives that keep people out of work. What Chuck Schumer is focused on are going after our Second Amendment rights, going after the rights of states to decide how voting is done in their states, a complete federal takeover of the election process in America. We talk about voter harvesting. I mean, that's when they have paid operatives that go door to door, neighborhood to neighborhood, nursing home to nursing home, collect ballots, and then those people, unsupervised, get to decide which of those ballots they actually want to turn in and which of those ballots they want to throw away. I mean, that's not what Americans want. What the Democrats are proposing is eliminating voter ID. That's where people, when you go and ask for a ballot and you tell them who you are, you need to actually show an identification to prove that it is who you say you are. Great majorities of American people believe that is exactly the way voting should be done, and you can have integrity in the ballots. So we're at a point where Republicans are focusing on the things that people need and care about and tell us affect their lives, while Chuck Schumer continues to play politics.
Well, a lot of focus again on the southern border last week, the Vice President's discussions about what to do there, but nothing seems to be changing. May was the highest illegal immigration to the border in 21 years. Bill Clinton was president the last time we had a number that high. Clearly, the things that we're doing aren't working, and matter of fact, it's fairly hard to find out what we're doing to even try to make a difference at the border. Democrats look at the money available for COVID, and they've, as of last week, now used $3 billion of those dollars to fund the problem of unaccompanied children. There are 13 times as many unaccompanied children coming to the border as there were a year ago, and a substantial number more than any year in recent history. You know, the Trump administration was doing a lot of things that were right at the border. They were focusing on securing the border. They were working with the 3 countries that were sending the most people through Mexico to the border. They were working with Mexico to see what you could do in Mexico to make a difference of people coming to our border and having real success. I'd suggest that the Biden administration should look at what the Trump administration was doing that was working and do more of that and less of what they're doing now.
Just to continue on with that theme, having a 21-year all-time high of illegal border crossings is pretty astounding. And we have also seen a massive increase of fentanyl coming across our southern border. And folks, this doesn't just affect the people that live in those border communities. It affects all of our American communities, even families located in Iowa. And what we have seen, a recent poll was done, what we have seen is that 85% of those polled believe we need stronger borders here in the United States. Again, this is not just a southern border town issue. These are issues that are transferring into the rest of our states and affecting our families and our families' livelihoods. So it is an issue that we would like the administration to take a look at. Put your eyes on, come up with solutions, and share those with Congress. We all need to be part of the solution, but yet we have an administration that, one, will not talk about it, and two, will not visit our southern border.
The Democrats actually should look at polls before they take the vote on S1, because if you look at all the polls, Americans completely disagree with what they're trying to do with S1. They shouldn't. Americans believe you should have an ID when you vote. They don't believe in ballot harvesting. They don't believe that the government should take tax dollars and give it to politicians to run attack ads. So when Chuck Schumer goes and gets the Democrats to vote for S1, he's actually hurting the Democrats because it's not what the public agrees with. If you look at inflation numbers, PPI just came out 6.6%. You saw CPI came out last week at 5%. Gas prices are up 53% in a year. Milk prices are up 9%. Bread prices are up 7%. It's impacting families all across the country, but especially people like my family growing up that struggle to put food on the table. The poorest families, people live on fixed income, are struggling. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet is causing part of this. They have an $8 trillion balance sheet. And what the Biden administration and Democrats are doing is just reckless spending is causing this inflation.
Any pause to do a bipartisan infrastructure bill if Democrats plan on just passing their own agenda immediately after that on a reconciliation bill?
Well, I think the majority leaders indicated there will be a reconciliation effort. I think what they're wrestling with is what will it contain. So we are anticipating at some point getting a reconciliation bill. I guess what we will find out soon is whether there is an additional bipartisan effort to address a subject that a lot of us would like to address.
Leader McConnell.
Yeah.
Could you clarify your comments from yesterday about the Supreme Court? Are you saying that if you're the majority leader in 2023, if there's a vacancy in the Supreme Court, you will not move on a Biden nominee?
Yeah, when I made the decision I did back in 2016 with regard to a vacancy on the Supreme Court occurring in a presidential year, I was very much aware of the fact that when you had divided government, there had not been a nominee confirmed by a Senate of a different party from the president since the 1880s. I was also aware that Joe Biden, chairman of the Judiciary Committee in 1992, a time of divided government, had said, had a vacancy occurred, they would not fill it. So what I said yesterday, Manu, was simply to repeat the position I took in 2016. I'm absolutely confident if the shoe had been on the other foot, the other side would have done exactly the same thing.
2023
is not an election.
Senator McConnell, Republicans who met with you Wednesday to brief you on the bipartisan deal said that you were open to it. Can you explain a little bit more your view of that bipartisan proposal, and do you have any concerns?
Well, probably the best way to express how I feel about it is I would love to see us get an outcome on infrastructure. It's important. The country needs it. We have a history of doing infrastructure on a bipartisan basis. You just saw an example of that in the EPW committee, a different bill, but came out unanimously. If there's ever an area, it seems to me, that cries out for the same kind of bipartisanship that we brought to the fore all this year. We've passed 6 different significant bills this year on a bipartisan basis. The Senate can do that in areas that are open for agreement. So put me down as listening and hopeful that somehow, some way, we'll be able to move forward with an infrastructure bill that does 2 things. Number one, does not revised the 2017 tax bill, which all of us, to a person, believe was the major contributor to us having the best economy in 50 years in February of 2020 before the pandemic hit. And to the extent that we want to go above what the gas tax produces, the revenue from the gas tax, figure a way to credibly pay for it. Those are the only two things I'd like to see. I think that's what the group of 10 are hoping to be able to sell to a larger portion of the Senate. But in the end, it'll be up to the majority leader to decide what to do.